The City Hall Plaza was unusually quiet that morning, the hum of distant traffic swallowed by the weight of heat rising off the stone steps. Mariah Lewis clutched her clipboard, fingers tight around the worn edges, heart thudding. Her eyes scanned the courthouse steps as Officer Daniel Harker stepped out his cruiser, sunglasses glinting, his badge catching the sunlight like a warning. "Hey, lady," he barked, his voice cutting through the hush like a whip. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" Mariah's throat tightened. She straightened her posture, though the clipboard trembled slightly under her grip. "I'm documenting precinct closures." "Public record, sir," she said calmly, trying to keep her voice steady. Harker's eyes narrowed, the line between curiosity and contempt thin and dangerous. "Public records, huh? You sure you belong here? You don't look like you're on the city's team." A flicker of panic surged through Mariah, mingling with the righteous fire she had carried for years. Her chest rose with the breath she forced steady, and she answered, "I belong wherever the law belongs, officer." He laughed, cold, sharp, dismissive. "We'll see about that." A gust of wind swept across the steps, scattering papers from her clipboard. One flew at his feet. He kicked it with a smirk, and Mariah's stomach dropped. Around them, the world seemed to hold its breath. She clenched her jaw, gripping the clipboard like a shield. Something told her this encounter wouldn't end here, not until the truth came crashing down, and she would be the one holding it. Her eyes met his through the mirrored lenses, and for a heartbeat, everything froze. The City Hall Plaza baked in the mid-morning sun, the stone steps radiating heat that made Mariah Lewis's black flat stick slightly with each step. She adjusted the strap of her tote bag, feeling the weight of the clipboard inside. Thick with documents that mapped out precinct closures she suspected were more than bureaucratic reshuffling. Every step she took felt like walking into a spotlight, her presence under scrutiny even before she reached the top. "Hey!" The voice cut across the plaza like a whip. Mariah froze, heart skipping a beat. She turned slowly, and there he was, Officer Daniel Harker, leaning casually against his patrol car, mirrored sunglasses reflecting the sun like a shield. His uniform was crisp, his badge shining, his hand resting near his holster in a gesture that was both casual and threatening. "Excuse me," Mariah said, voice steady but wary. "You there," he barked, striding toward her. "What are you doing?" "I'm documenting precinct closures," she replied, lifting the clipboard slightly. "Public records. I have authorization." Harker's lips twisted in a smirk. "Public records, huh? You sure you belong here? You don't look like you're part of the city's team." Mariah's chest tightened. Every fiber of her wanted to back down, but she had rehearsed this moment for months. "I belong wherever the law belongs, officer," she said firmly, letting each word land like a small shield between them. He laughed, low and sharp, like he enjoyed proving a point she hadn't even made. "We'll see about that." He stepped closer, the kind of step that erased personal space. Mariah's fingers gripped the edge of the clipboard a little too hard, and a paper slipped, fluttering down the steps. Harker kicked it casually. "Oops. Careful there," he said, a mockery hidden beneath the civility. "Wouldn't want you to mess things up for the city." Mariah bent to retrieve the paper, her movements careful, deliberate. She didn't trust the man not to escalate. Around them, a few passers-by glanced over, shrugged, and moved along, unwilling to intervene. The plaza felt hollow, every echo of her footsteps magnified. "You're making me nervous," Harker said, leaning in closer, tone feigning annoyance but carrying a subtle threat. "I don't like people wandering around asking questions they don't understand." "I'm not asking questions," Mariah replied, holding her gaze. "I'm documenting facts. You should try it sometime." Harker's brow furrowed. "Facts, huh? Let me guess. Your facts are going to paint the precincts in a bad light. You're one of those activists, aren't you?" Mariah's fingers twitched on the clipboard. She didn't flinch. "I document what the records say. Interpret them however you like." He laughed again, louder this time, a bark that drew attention. "Records don't mean anything if they're in the wrong hands," he said. "And you're in the wrong hands." A gust of wind whipped across the steps, rustling papers in Mariah's tote. She held them close, feeling the weight of every document, every case, every complaint she collected over months of meticulous research. Each file was a testament to systemic failures, to patterns of neglect, and to officers like Harker who wielded authority like a weapon. "You're overstepping," she said quietly but firmly. "And I'm not afraid of being here." Harker tilted his head, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Not afraid, huh? We'll see about that." He leaned even closer, and Mariah could feel the warmth radiating off him, the implicit threat of a hand hovering near the holster at his side. Her pulse raced. She reminded herself to breathe, to keep the voice steady, to keep the words precise. "Officer Harker," she said, "I am a citizen exercising my right to document public information. I suggest you step back and do your job, instead of making this personal." "Making it personal?" He chuckled, the sound sharp and brittle. "You're the one digging into everyone's business. Try and take down my precinct? My work? That's personal, sweetheart." Mariah's stomach sank, but her resolve hardened. She had known this was coming. The subtle glances, the dismissive tones, the invisible line she wasn't supposed to cross. But she hadn't expected the aggression to be this raw, this immediate. "Sweetheart?" she repeated under her breath, the word tasting like acid in her mouth. She straightened, planting her feet firmly. "You'll find that professionalism isn't negotiable, even for officers." Harker's smirk faltered for a split second before he masked it. "You're bold. I'll give you that. But bold doesn't mean safe." Mariah felt a flash of fear, sharp and immediate, but she didn't show it. Her mind raced. If she left now, she would look intimidated. If she stayed, he might escalate. She weighed her options in a fraction of a second, deciding that documentation and standing her ground was the only power she had. "I am safe," she said, voice low but unwavering, "because I'm doing the right thing." Harker's jaw tightened. He stepped back, tilting his head as if measuring her, sizing up her confidence against his authority. The mirrored lenses of his sunglasses glinted, hiding his eyes but magnifying the threat he exuded. "Right," he said finally, the single word dripping with derision. "We'll see about that." He turned sharply, walking back toward his cruiser, but not before giving her one last glare that made her feel exposed, like prey under a predator's gaze. Mariah exhaled slowly, shaking off the tremor in her hands. The plaza suddenly seemed too large, too empty. She gathered her papers, tucked the clipboard under her arm, and made her way down the steps, each movement deliberate, careful, public. Her mind replayed the encounter. Every smirk, every word, every subtle threat. She knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Somewhere deep down, she also knew that Harker's confidence, his sense of untouchability, was fragile. That realization gave her a strange mix of fear and determination. She had work to do, and she would see it through. And as she walked away, she felt eyes following her. Not just Harker's, but the unseen weight of a system designed to intimidate, silence, and erase people like her. Mariah clenched the clipboard tighter. One day, she told herself, those eyes would be watching him, exposing everything he thought he could hide. For now, she had to survive the morning, the steps, the smirk, and the threat that lingered like smoke in the sun-baked plaza. The encounter ended, but the war had just begun. The Office of Internal Affairs smelled faintly of bleach and bureaucracy. Mariah's heels clicked against the linoleum floor as she approached the front desk, her clipboard tucked firmly under her arm. A thin layer of sweat had gathered at her hairline. Adrenaline still hummed in her veins from the encounter with Harker. The receptionist looked up, barely glancing at her. "ID?" she asked monotone. Mariah handed over her badge from the Civil Rights Office. Her official credentials. "I'm here to file a complaint against Officer Daniel Harker. It's regarding harassment and intimidation while I was documenting precinct closures." The receptionist's fingers paused over the keyboard. "Internal Affairs doesn't usually handle that. You should, schedule a meeting with the precinct first." Mariah exhaled slowly, feeling the first wave of fatigue. She had expected resistance, but the casual dismissal stung. "I understand procedure," she said, keeping her voice calm, "but this involves misconduct and potential abuse of power. I am filing the report today." The receptionist's eyes flicked toward the back office, where a man in a gray suit was reviewing a stack of files. Agent Morales will see you, she said, her tone clipped. Take a seat. Mariah settled into a chair, her clipboard balanced on her lap. She could hear muted conversations, the shuffle of papers, the distant ring of phones. Every sound reminded her of the environment she was challenging, a system built to protect people like Harker and minimize complaints like hers. Mariah Lewis? The voice was crisp, formal. Agent Morales extended a hand as she approached. She was a woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed and efficient, but Mariah noticed a guarded tension in her shoulders, as though she'd handled dozens of complaints like this and expected nothing to come of them. Yes, Mariah said, standing. Thank you for seeing me. Morales gestured to a small office. Have a seat. Let's get the details down. Mariah opened her clipboard, spreading out the documentation. Photos, copies of public records, notes on the encounter. Morales glanced at them, nodding but maintaining a detached expression. So, Morales began, tell me what happened. Mariah recounted the incident step by step. The steps of the plaza, the kick of the paper, the mocking tone, the implied threat. She emphasized the patterns she had noticed in Harker's behavior, connecting it to a history of microaggressions and intimidation against black citizens. Morales scribbled notes, occasionally looking up. And you didn't feel threatened enough to call for backup? I did not call the police, Mariah said, steady. I am documenting public information. I am protected under the law. Harker's name made Morales pause briefly. He has complaints filed against him before, she admitted, then glanced down at the paperwork. Mostly minor, citizens saying he was abrasive, overbearing. Nothing was ever substantiated. Mariah bit back frustration. Exactly. That's how it works. A pattern builds, but individually, each incident is dismissed. Morales nodded slowly. And your report, this will go into the system. But, full disclosure, our office is selective in what moves forward. Sometimes it takes a while. Mariah nodded. I understand, but it's on record now. Silence fell for a moment, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then Morales said, Do you have witnesses? Mariah shook her head. Not exactly. Passers-by were present, but no one intervened. That's part of the problem. Everyone sees, everyone notices, but few act. Morales sighed. That's typical. People are hesitant to get involved. Fear, bureaucracy, social conditioning. Mariah's hands tightened on the clipboard. She had known this. Every system she challenged carried invisible barriers, subtle silences, and the weight of inaction. I'm aware, she said quietly, but if no one steps forward, the system stays corrupt. The same officers remain unchecked. The same patterns repeat. Morales's eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. You're brave, you know that, she said. Most people wouldn't come in here after an encounter like that. Mariah's lips pressed together. Bravery isn't the point. Accountability is. People like Harker shouldn't operate unchecked. It's bigger than fear or comfort. It's about justice. Morales nodded. She finished her notes, stacking the papers. I'll submit this for review, she said, though her tone carried the weight of doubt. Just don't expect immediate action. The system doesn't move fast. Mariah nodded, masking her frustration. I understand, but every record matters. Every report builds a case. Every voice contributes. She stood, thanked Morales, and left the office, feeling the heat of the sun even more acutely than before. Each step down the corridor echoed like a reminder that resistance came with friction, and friction was tiring. Outside, the city pulsed with normalcy, people walking dogs, tourists taking pictures, office workers chatting over coffee, but Mariah felt the isolation fight. Every interaction with someone like Harker reminded her of the imbalance of power, of the invisible currents that protected the privileged and punished the vulnerable. A man in a business suit brushed past her. He didn't look up. He didn't notice her. She wanted to shout, to tell him what she had seen, but she stayed silent. She had learned the lesson long ago. The fight wasn't about convincing everyone in the moment. It was about building evidence, documenting the truth, and preparing for the day when the system could no longer ignore it. Mariah walked to the edge of the plaza, looking back at the municipal building. The steps still gleamed in the sun, the stone radiant and unforgiving. She thought about Harker, about his arrogance, his dismissive smirk, the confidence that he was untouchable. That confidence was a weakness she could exploit. Her phone buzzed. A text from her colleague, a legal analyst who had been reviewing precinct records. "Did you get through? Everything okay?" Mariah typed quickly. "Yes. Filed. Not optimistic, but it's in the system." She stared at the screen for a moment, thinking about the long road ahead. Each document, each interaction, each silent observer contributed to the weight of justice she carried. She felt a familiar mix of exhaustion and resolve, tired but unbroken. As she tucked her clipboard under her arm and started down the street, she knew the fight was just beginning. Harker had underestimated her, as he always underestimated the people who refused to be intimidated. And while the system might be slow, meticulous, and frustrating, she had patience. And patience, combined with persistence, had power. For Mariah, the day ended not with victory, but with a quiet affirmation. She would not stop. She would not falter. The papers were filed. The record existed. And soon, the truth would speak louder than intimidation, fear, or prejudice. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a single thought lingered, sharp and persistent. This is only the beginning. Mariah's apartment smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Her laptop hummed on the kitchen table, open to the spreadsheet she had been compiling for weeks. Names of precincts, officers' closure dates, and patterns of complaints. She sipped her third cup of coffee, aware that caffeine was the only thing keeping her nerves steady. Her phone buzzed. A notification from Internal Affairs. Complaint received. Case number 7421. Assigned officer will review. Mariah exhaled sharply. The words were small, bureaucratic, lifeless, but to her, they were a lifeline. She knew the system rarely moved, yet this step mattered. One record added to countless others, another piece of evidence in a pattern too long ignored. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find Kevin, her colleague and occasional research partner, holding a folder stuffed with printed files. "Morning, Mariah. Brought some of the old precinct closure records. Thought you might need them." "Thanks," she said, taking the folder. She flipped it open, scanning the documents quickly. Perfect timing. Kevin raised an eyebrow. "Rough morning." "You could say that," she said, setting her clipboard aside. "Harker was there, on the plaza. He made it very clear I wasn't welcome." Kevin frowned. "You filing the complaint, right?" "I did. Internal Affairs. Case number 7421. She shrugged, not expecting immediate action. But at least it's documented. Kevin leaned against the counter. "You know the odds. They dismiss most of these complaints." Mariah's fingers tapped the edge of the table. "And yet patterns emerge. That's why I keep records. That's why I push forward. One incident dismissed doesn't mean the next one will be. One file log means accountability is possible." Kevin nodded slowly. "I get it, but it's exhausting." "It is," she admitted. "Every day feels like pushing a boulder uphill, and the system's hands are holding it down. But I can't let it go." The phone buzzed again. Another message from a legal aid contact. "Have you received confirmation from IA?" "Yes," Mariah typed back. Case number 7421. Filed. We wait. She leaned back in her chair, staring out the window at the city streets below. Cars moved with the rhythm of normal life, pedestrians chatting, children laughing. Meanwhile, she was fighting against invisible currents, subtle prejudices, systemic inertia, silent complicity. A text notification drew her attention. "Be careful. Harker's not someone who forgets easily." Mariah's jaw tightened. She had known this. The man was prideful, territorial, and arrogant. He believed his authority was untouchable, and that arrogance would be his weakness. Her phone buzzed again. Another contact from a journalist she had worked with on civil rights stories. "If you want this to matter, we need concrete evidence of the pattern. Are you compiling it?" "Yes," she replied, keeping her hand steady despite the flutter in her chest. "Every interaction, every closure, every complaint. I'm building complete record." Kevin rubbed his eyes. "Mariah, Sometimes I worry. You're so focused on the system, you forget the personal cost. She looked at him, expression tight. I've sacrificed plenty. But if no one pushes back, nothing changes. Fear doesn't stop them from acting. It stops us from responding. And I won't let fear dictate action. The room was quiet, save for the hum of her laptop. Mariah flipped through the files again, tracing names and dates, connecting the dots. Each piece of paper was more than ink and paper. It was history, accountability, a record that someone, someday, would have to answer for. Do you think they'll listen? Kevin asked. Some will, she said. And if they don't, the evidence will speak for itself. Harker's record, these precincts, patterns don't lie. He nodded, still uncertain. I just hope you're ready for fallout. People like Harker, they don't take being exposed lightly. Mariah's gaze hardened. I'm ready, and I'm not alone. Every documented incident, every witness, every ally who sees this, they're part of the fight too. We're not acting in isolation. A sudden knock at the door startled her. Mariah stood quickly, her heart hammering. But when she opened it, it was just a mailman with a small package of records she had ordered months ago, historical precinct reports, archive paperwork that could take her research to the next level. She smiled faintly, though fatigue tugged at her. Each step forward was hard, each battle exhausting. But these small victories mattered. She sat back down, spreading the new files across the table. Her fingers traced the typed names and handwritten notes. Every closure, every memo, every complaint painted a picture she had been building for years. Systemic bias, unchecked authority, and officers like Harker who believed they were untouchable. Hours passed. Sunlight shifted across the apartment, marking the slow march of time. Mariah worked tirelessly, cross-referencing names, compiling a digital backup, annotating patterns. Her phone buzzed sporadically. Texts from colleagues, journalists, legal contacts, all offering support, advice, or warnings. By late afternoon, she leaned back in her chair, exhaustion weighing down her shoulders. Her eyes, however, burned with resolve. The complaint was filed. The evidence was gathering. And Harker, arrogant, dismissive, dangerous, was on record. One day, she thought, the weight of these records would be undeniable. The system could ignore a complaint here, a complaint there, but a pattern? A pattern would speak louder than threats, smirks, or dismissals. She allowed herself a small smile, tinged with grim determination. The boulder she pushed uphill was heavy, yes, but every step mattered. Every file mattered. Every documented instance of abuse was a small victory in a fight too long ignored. Mariah's phone buzzed once more, and she glanced at the screen. Keep going. Don't let him intimidate you. She clenched her fist around the edge of the table. She wouldn't stop. She wouldn't falter. The fight had only just begun. And deep down, she knew that Harker's own hubris would be the thread that eventually unraveled him. She just had to keep documenting, keep pushing, keep building the case no one could ignore. Because when the system finally had to reckon with the truth, there would be no hiding, no excuses, and no place for intimidation. For now, she filed one more set of reports, checked her notes, and exhaled. The day had been long. The fight was far from over. But the record existed, and the record mattered. Mariah's apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in as her laptop glowed across the table. Files were stacked high, printed precinct reports, internal memos, and spreadsheets marked with annotations in her precise handwriting. She scrolled through public databases, linking officer complaints, closure dates, and patterns of misconduct. Each entry was another puzzle piece, revealing a system resistant to transparency. A ping echoed from her email. It was a tip from an investigative journalist. Officer Harker has at least 5 unresolved complaints from the past 2 years. Public records show no action taken. Mariah leaned back, absorbing the weight of the revelation. 5 complaints, ignored, buried, dismissed. Patterns didn't lie. She whispered under her breath, "This is what I needed." Her phone buzzed. Kevin's message, wanting to cross-check the precinct archives, could reveal patterns over a decade. Yes, every bit helps, she typed back, hand shaking slightly from excitement and adrenaline. Hours passed in a blur of tabs, PDFs, and spreadsheets. Each complaint told the same story. Dismissive superiors, excuses, silences. Each file was a fingerprint of systemic bias. Harker's name appeared repeatedly, a red thread weaving through precinct after precinct. A knock at the door broke her concentration. It was Simone, a legal analyst she trusted. "You've been at it all day," Simone said, stepping in with a thermos of coffee. "Found anything juicy?" Mariah gestured at the screen. "Harker's pattern is worse than I thought. 5 unresolved complaints. Dozens of closure memos linked to him. I can connect these dots and show it's not isolated. It's institutional." Simone's eyes widened. "That's big. Big enough to get media attention?" "Bigger," Mariah said. "It's undeniable. Patterns across time, across precincts. He's not just one bad apple. He's part of a rotten tree." They pored over the records, cross-referencing dates, locations, and officer interactions. Dialogue flowed rapidly between them, technical, precise, almost frantic in energy. Mariah explained her methodology, marking connections, highlighting discrepancies. Each revelation stoked a resolve. This wasn't just about personal harassment anymore. It was about systemic accountability. Kevin arrived later, laptop in hand. Excitement mirrored in his eyes. "I ran the archival data," he said. "It confirms your theory. Harker shows up repeatedly in complaints, often coinciding with precinct closures that disproportionately affect Black communities." Mariah's pulse quickened. "We can map this visually. Charts, timelines, the works. Make it undeniable to the public." The 3 worked late into the evening. Outside, the city lights flickered on, distant sirens punctuating the night. Mariah's focus was absolute. She felt the weight of every complaint, every dismissed incident, every overlooked victim pressing into her awareness. This was more than research. It was justice in progress. "Do you think he suspects?" Simone asked quietly. Mariah shook her head. "No. Harker underestimates everyone around him. That's his weakness. His confidence blinds him to the scrutiny he's under. And now, with all this data, he'll have nowhere to hide." Kevin leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You realize exposing this could put you at risk too?" Mariah's eyes were steady. "I've accepted that. The risk is part of accountability. If fear dictates action, nothing changes. We proceed." By midnight, a preliminary map was complete. Lines connecting complaints, precinct closures, dates, and demographic data. The pattern was stark, undeniable. Harker's name was highlighted at every critical junction. Mariah leaned back, letting out a long breath. "This is it," she whispered. "This shows the system, the pattern, the personal misconduct. This is what we need." Simone placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're brave, Mariah. Most people wouldn't handle this. But remember, you don't have to do it alone." Mariah nodded, her eyes scanning the screen one last time. The digital footprints were clear, a trail of misconduct, negligence, and abuse of power. The pattern would speak louder than threats, smirks, or dismissals. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. Every spreadsheet, every note, every timestamp complaint was a small victory in the long fight for accountability. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the storm Mariah was preparing. But soon, the truth would ripple outward, undeniable, unignorable. And Harker, arrogant, confident, untouchable, would have nowhere to hide. Mariah's heels clicked sharply on the linoleum floor of the precinct lobby. Her tote bag pressed against her side, heavy with folders and printed documents. She had been here before, but this time was different. Today, she wasn't just observing. She was gathering evidence for a story she intended to make undeniable. Officer Harker was behind the front desk, his presence dominating the space, even when he wasn't speaking. He glanced up as she entered, eyebrows lifting in mock surprise. Well, he said, leaning back in his chair. "Back again? Can't stay away, can you?" Mariah's pulse quickened, but she forced her voice calm. "I have business here, Officer Harker. I'm documenting precinct closures and misconduct patterns. It's public record work, nothing more." Harker's lips twisted into a smirk. "Public record work? You really think poking around my precinct is going to get you anywhere?" I think the records speak for themselves, Mariah replied, lifting a folder slightly for emphasis. Patterns emerge. That's why I'm here. Harker pushed his chair back and stood, looming over the counter. Patterns, huh? You really are bold. Don't know if I should admire you or tell you to leave before you embarrass yourself. Mariah's jaw tightened. I'm not here to impress you. I'm here to document facts. You'll find that the facts don't bend to arrogance or intimidation. A young officer passed by, glancing nervously at the confrontation, then muttering under his breath. Mariah noticed and her chest tightened. Witnesses existed, but fear silenced them. The system protected people like Harker, and intimidation was his default weapon. You really think a few files make you powerful? Harker said, circling the counter like a predator. I've been doing this a long time. You're just another civilian trying to stir trouble. I've been documenting a long time, too. Mariah shot back. And the record doesn't lie. Your complaints, the precinct closures, patterns of intimidation. This is bigger than you, Officer Harker, and bigger than your arrogance. Harker stopped, staring at her with thinly veiled anger. You're overstepping. You think you can come in here and expose me? Everyone will laugh at you. Expose you? Mariah repeated, voice low but steady. I'm exposing the truth. The difference is, the truth can't be silenced. Patterns, data, repeated incidents. Those aren't opinions. They're reality. The air between them felt charged, thick with tension. Harker leaned forward, almost touching the counter, his glare sharp. You really should be careful, Miss Lewis. Some things don't end well for people like you. Mariah met his gaze unflinchingly. Some things end badly for people who abuse power, officer. History shows that, too. Harker's smirk faltered slightly. He straightened, tried to regain his composure, but his confidence seemed thinner than before. Mariah noticed a subtle shift, the faint crack in his armor. I don't need this, he muttered, turning back to his chair. Do your work and leave my precinct out of it. Mariah gathered her folders, but she didn't retreat. The precinct is part of the record, whether you like it or not. Accountability isn't optional. A receptionist peeked from the back office. Everything okay here? Yes, Mariah said, keeping her tone calm, though her chest still pounded. Everything is fine. She walked to the exit slowly, keeping her eyes on Harker until she reached the door. He watched silently, a tension lingering between them, a storm yet to break. Outside, the city moved around her, indifferent to the small battle waged in the lobby. Once on the street, Mariah exhaled, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. The encounter had been intense, but it had also revealed a subtle shift. Harker's confidence, his untouchability, had small cracks. Every document she carried, every pattern she uncovered, chipped away at the myth of his invincibility. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kevin. Everything okay? Yes, she typed back. Encounter Harker. He's rattled, not giving up. She looked at her folders again, the weight of every file, every memo, every complaint pressing against her. This was more than confrontation. It was evidence. Evidence that spoke louder than threats or intimidation. Later, in her apartment, she laid out the files across the table. Red strings connected complaints, dates, precinct closures. Patterns emerged clearer than ever. Harker's repeated involvement in incidents, the selective enforcement of rules, the intimidation of civilians, it all formed a web of systemic abuse. Simone arrived, carrying fresh coffee. So, she asked. He's rattled, Mariah said, nodding toward the screen. You could see it. His confidence, his smirk, they're thinner now. He knows someone's watching, documenting, connecting the dots. Simone frowned. Good, but you have to be careful. People like him can be unpredictable when they feel cornered. Mariah didn't flinch. I prepared for that. My notes are meticulous, and every step is documented. I won't be intimidated. And if he tries to retaliate, it will be on record too. Kevin leaned over the table. We need to be strategic. Public exposure, media, legal channels. You can't just confront him endlessly. That's dangerous. I know, Mariah said. That's why the digital footprint is critical. Every file, every complaint, every memo documented. Patterns undeniable. Systemic evidence is the only way to take him down. They worked late into the night, mapping precinct closures, cross-referencing complaints, highlighting Harker's involvement. The tension of the day hung over them, but it also sharpened their focus. Mariah glanced out the window at the street below. The city was quiet now, unaware of the storm being prepared inside her apartment. But soon, that storm would hit. The patterns, the evidence, the compiled data, they would speak louder than Harker's threats, louder than the dismissive bureaucracy, louder than fear. And when that happened, Officer Daniel Harker's untouchable image would begin to unravel. Mariah sat at a long table in the dimly lit conference room, her laptop open and folders spread across the surface like a battlefield map. Across from her, Simone and Kevin reviewed documents, their faces lit by the glow of the screens. Outside, the city hummed unaware, but inside, they were orchestrating a counterstrike against a system that had long protected abuse. "Look at this," Mariah said, pointing to a spreadsheet on her laptop. "Notice the precinct closures in 2019 and 2021? Both coincide with multiple complaints filed against Harker. And check the demographics. These closures disproportionately affected Black communities." Simone leaned closer. "This is concrete. Numbers, dates, locations. Patterns emerge clearly. We can link him directly to misconduct and systemic bias." Kevin nodded, scrolling through archived PDFs. "I cross-referenced payroll records and internal memos. His precinct consistently reallocated resources to avoid oversight. It's intentional, not just bureaucratic error." Mariah's chest rose with quiet satisfaction. "Exactly. This isn't just about one officer being arrogant. It's a network of complicit systems protecting him. And once we present this collectively, it's undeniable." Simone frowned. "You realize the risk here, right? He's arrogant but dangerous. When he feels exposed, people get hurt, not just reputations, but physically." "I know," Mariah said calmly, though her fingers tightened around the edge of the laptop. "We document carefully, cross-check everything, and maintain transparency. The evidence itself is our shield." Kevin rubbed his temples. "I can draft a visual timeline. Graphs, charts, maps. If the media sees this, there's no way to dismiss it as anecdotal or biased." Mariah nodded. "Good. Also, compile all internal complaints that were dismissed. Highlight the discrepancies between policy and action. Show the system shielding him." Hours passed in meticulous work. Dialogue flowed constantly, discussions about data integrity, verification, and strategy. Each conversation was tense, but focused. They weren't just compiling evidence. They were building a narrative, a story the public could not ignore. Late in the afternoon, Mariah leaned back, stretching tired arms. "It's exhausting," she admitted. "The system resists, people dismiss, and yet we keep pushing. Every file, every memo, every complaint, we're making the truth undeniable." Simone smiled faintly. "You got the kind of resilience most people can't fathom. But remember, you're not alone. That matters." Kevin added, "We need to ensure the story reaches the right hands. Journalists, legal teams, public advocacy groups. Amplification is key. Without it, Harker's influence can smother the evidence." Mariah opened a secure chat thread she maintained with local journalists. "We have patterns, timelines, documented complaints. All verified. Are you ready to go public?" A moment later, a reply. "Yes, but proceed carefully. Make sure it's airtight. This could blow the lid off the precinct." She exhaled. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about exposing Harker. It was about accountability in a system designed to protect power at the expense of justice. Even as exhaustion threatened to weigh her down, Mariah felt a surge of determination. Every colleague, every ally, every line of verified data strengthened the position they were building. Harker's arrogance, his dismissiveness, his belief that he was untouchable. It was all part of the pattern they would reveal. Kevin looked up from his screen, rubbing his eyes. "We got the evidence. Now it's about strategy. Release, timing, narrative. And yes, legal preparation in case he tries to retaliate." Mariah nodded, her mind already racing through next steps. We can't let fear dictate pace. Every file, every connection matters. We proceed carefully but deliberately. Exposure is coming, and the system will have to respond. Simone placed a hand on Mariah's shoulder. Just remember, Mariah, even when it feels like a lonely fight, it's not. You've built a team. You've built evidence. And the truth is on your side. Mariah's gaze softened, briefly allowing a hint of relief. I know, and that's why we keep going. Every document is a small victory. Every confirmed pattern another step toward accountability. This is bigger than Harker. Bigger than one precinct. It's about systemic reform. Night fell, and the city lights flickered on outside the conference room windows. Mariah and her team worked silently, methodically, until the documents, spreadsheets, and charts formed a cohesive body of evidence. Comprehensive, undeniable, and lethal in its precision. Finally, she leaned back, letting the tension drain from her shoulders. The work wasn't over. Exposure wasn't guaranteed. Harker would resist, deny, and retaliate. But for the first time, Mariah felt the weight of inevitability. The truth they had compiled could no longer be ignored. She whispered under her breath, almost to herself, "This is it. This is how we hold them accountable." Simone and Kevin glanced at her, understanding. This was no longer just research. It was a battle for justice, meticulously documented and ready to confront systemic abuse. Mariah's phone buzzed with another message. "Ready when you are, but check everything twice." She smiled faintly. Exhaustion tugged at her, but determination overpowered it. They had allies, evidence, strategy, and resilience. Harker's untouchable image was cracking, and soon the world would see it too. For now, they would finish verifying the last pieces of the puzzle. The storm was gathering, and once it hit, there would be no turning back. The newsroom smelled of coffee, paper, and electricity. Computers hummed. Phones rang intermittently, and the muted chatter of journalists filled the space. Mariah and Kevin entered, carrying folders and laptops. Simone followed, her presence a quiet anchor amidst the chaos. "Everyone ready?" Mariah asked, glancing around the room. A journalist, Rebecca, nodded. "We verified your data. The patterns are clear, the complaints documented, and the precinct closures disproportionate. Once we go live, there's no turning back." Mariah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "We're not here for spectacle. We're here for accountability." Rebecca clicked a few keys, projecting visuals on the large screen. Charts, timelines, and maps showed a pattern spanning years. Officer Harker's name appeared repeatedly, linked directly to dismissals, harassment complaints, and precinct closures disproportionately affecting Black communities. "Let's make sure we highlight that this is systemic," Mariah said. "Not just one officer acting alone, but the precincts enabling him, the internal bureaucracy dismissing complaints, and the patterns that repeat unchecked." Kevin added, "We've included verified complaints, internal memos, and archival data. It's airtight." The newsroom team nodded, energy shifting from anticipation to urgency. Rebecca's fingers danced across the keyboard. "Going live in 3, 2, 1. On screens across the city, news anchors introduced a report. A local investigation has uncovered patterns of misconduct linked to Officer Daniel Harker and several precinct closures disproportionately affecting minority communities. Evidence includes official complaints, internal memos, and public records compiled meticulously by civil rights researcher Mariah Lewis. Mariah's pulse quickened as the visual scrolled, timelines, maps, and highlighted patterns. Every name, every date, every connection she had painstakingly verified flashed across the screen. The impact was immediate. A reporter on live footage commented, "This is unprecedented. Complaints against a single officer spanning years, dismissed repeatedly, now showing a broader pattern of systemic oversight failures. The implications are serious." Harker's office phone rang incessantly, his brow furrowed, fingers tapping the desk, and the confident smirk that usually adorned his face was replaced by tension. Around him, colleagues whispered, glancing nervously at the screen replaying the live report. In homes and offices across the city, social media exploded. Citizens shared clips, screenshots, and commentary. Activists and advocacy groups amplified the story, drawing attention to the broader systemic issues it revealed. Back in the newsroom, Mariah sat quietly, absorbing the scene. "This is it," she whispered. "This is what accountability looks like when the system refuses to act, but citizens demand truth." Simone touched her shoulder. "You've done something monumental. But be ready. Harker won't take this quietly. Expect retaliation, denials, and attempts to discredit everything you compiled." Mariah nodded. "I expected that. That's why everything is verified. Every document, every date, every complaint. There's no room for doubt. And when the truth is as clear, it's unstoppable." Kevin added, "He might still try legal threats, smear campaigns, or intimidate witnesses. We need a strategy for all of that." Mariah glanced at the visuals again. Each line, chart, and map represented months of work, sleepless nights, and relentless persistence. This wasn't just exposure. It was systemic accountability. Later that evening, she received a series of messages from allies and local activists. Congratulations, support, and plans for rallies. The city was awake now, watching, demanding action. Meanwhile, Harker's confidence eroded by the public scrutiny. He paced his office, picking up the phone, dialing contacts, attempting to regain control. But every ring, every call, every effort was met with resistance. Supervisors, activists, and internal investigators were already reviewing the public evidence. Mariah's phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Social media is trending. Public pressure mounting. Be ready for city officials to respond." She exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. They had done it. The work, the data, the painstaking compilation. It had all culminated in this public reckoning. Simone leaned back, exhausted but smiling. "You've changed the conversation. People are talking about systemic issues now, not just one officer." Mariah nodded. "Exactly. Harker is a symbol, but the story is bigger. This forces the system to acknowledge patterns, failures, and accountability. And it's only the beginning." Across town, Harker finally sank into his chair, slumping as a reality hit him. His smirk was gone, replaced by frustration, disbelief, and the first taste of vulnerability he had ever felt in his career. For the first time, his authority was publicly questioned, his untouchable image shattered. Mariah and her team monitored responses, documenting every development. The public's attention was now a force, holding the system accountable, amplifying the truth she had meticulously documented. She felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the understanding that the fight wasn't over. Harker would respond, the bureaucracy would resist, and there would be backlash. But for the first time, the momentum was undeniable, and the city could no longer ignore the patterns of misconduct. Mariah whispered to herself, "The truth is louder than arrogance, louder than dismissal, and louder than fear, and it will continue to echo." And in that moment she knew justice was coming, but so was resistance. The system would react, but the foundation of evidence was solid. Harker's downfall was imminent, not because she wanted revenge, but because she had uncovered the truth. The lights of the newsroom flickered over spreadsheets, charts, and projections. Every pattern, every complaint, every closure was now visible to the public, leaving no room for Harker to maneuver. Mariah's fight had reached a tipping point. The city was awake, watching, and demanding accountability. And nothing, not arrogance, not power, not threats, could stop it now. The Internal Affairs office was tense, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing in the sparsely furnished room. Officer Daniel Harker sat stiffly across from Agent Morales. Papers spread on the desk, evidence compiled by Mariah glaring up at him in stark clarity. For the first time, Harker looked smaller than his uniform suggested, the veneer of untouchability cracking with every document Morales slid forward. "Officer Harker," Morales began, her tone formal but edge with authority. "We reviewed multiple complaints and cross-referenced public records, precinct closure data, and internal memos. The patterns are undeniable." Harker's jaw tightened. "Patterns? This is nonsense. You're making assumptions. These are isolated incidents." Morales didn't flinch. "Isolated? 5 unresolved complaints over 2 years, multiple precinct closures disproportionately affecting minority communities, documented harassment incidents "Officer, the data paints a consistent picture." Harker leaned back, trying to mask the first flicker of fear. "I've served the city faithfully for over a decade. My record is exemplary. Any claims against me are exaggerated or politically motivated." Mariah's voice cut through the tension from the back of the room, calm but unmistakably firm. "Exaggerated? The evidence speaks for itself. Every complaint, every memo, every closure shows a pattern. Your authority has been misused, and the system that enabled it cannot ignore the facts any longer." Harker's eyes narrowed, glancing toward her. "You compiled this?" Mariah nodded. "Yes, and I have allies, witnesses, and verified data ready to support every point. The truth is documented, and it cannot be silenced." The room was silent for a moment, save for the shuffle of papers. Morales finally said, "Officer Harker, your actions or inactions have violated multiple protocols. This investigation will proceed formally, and disciplinary recommendations will be submitted to the chief." Harker's hands trembled slightly, betraying the first real sign of fear. He had relied on arrogance, intimidation, and systemic complacency for too long. Now, confronted by documented truth, the walls were closing in. "Procedures?" he asked, voice tight. "This is an attack. A coordinated attack against me." Mariah's gaze was steady. "It's accountability, not revenge, and it's overdue. The evidence is public and internal. Your conduct has consequences, as it should." Morales continued, "You will have a chance to respond formally, but the documentation is thorough. Your superiors are aware. The patterns are public knowledge now. Your actions cannot be ignored." Harker swallowed hard, a cold sweat forming on his brow. "This can't be happening. I follow the rules. I've protected the precinct." Mariah shook her head slightly. "You protected your pride, your comfort, and your unchecked authority. Not the precinct, not the people you swore to serve." The room remained silent, the weight of her words pressing against him. He had never been confronted with such clarity, such precision, such moral and systemic inevitability. A notification buzzed on Mariah's phone. She glanced at it, then back at Harker. The public response is escalating. Social media, news outlets, and advocacy groups are demanding accountability. There's no retreat from this moment, officer. You either cooperate or face continued exposure and legal consequences. Harker's hand shook now, gripping the edge of the desk. His smirk was gone, replaced by dread and disbelief. He had built his career on fear, on assumption of immunity, and on silence. But every silent witness, every documented complaint, every verified record had finally turned into a force too large to ignore. Morales leaned back. "The disciplinary board will convene within the week. Legal review will proceed. You will be temporarily relieved of active duty, pending results. Any attempts to intimidate witnesses or interfere will be documented and pursued." Harker's breathing grew rapid, shallow. He opened his mouth to argue, to deny, to assert control, but no words would undo the evidence before him. Mariah stepped forward, voice calm but sharp. "This is not a personal attack. Harker, this is accountability. A system that failed will no longer shield individual misconduct. You are facing consequences because you misused authority, harassed civilians, and perpetuated systemic inequities. The law, the records, and public scrutiny now demand justice." Harker's shoulders slumped. For the first time, he felt powerless. The shields of privilege, arrogance, and fear were gone. The truth had pierced the armor he had relied upon for years. Morales closed the file with a decisive snap. "We will proceed according to protocol. Your cooperation is required." Mariah exhaled quietly. Months of meticulous documentation, sleepless nights, and careful verification had led to this moment. The confrontation at the precinct, the public exposure, the mapping of patterns, all had converged. Justice, delayed but inevitable, was finally at hand. Harker rose slowly, silent, defeated, no smirk left on his face. He had underestimated Mariah, underestimated the power of persistence, evidence, and allies. For the first time in his career, he faced consequences that could not be dismissed or ignored. Mariah watched him go, feeling a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. Justice was rarely clean, rarely painless, but today it had been served. The system, imperfect though it remained, had been forced to reckon with truth. As she left the office, the sun breaking through gray clouds outside, Mariah felt the quiet weight of what had been achieved. Accountability was never instantaneous, and the fight for equity was far from over. But this was a victory, hard-won and undeniable. Outside, city life moved on, unaware of the quiet reckoning that had just occurred within these walls. But Mariah knew. Every pattern documented, every file compiled, every voice amplified mattered. And today, it had mattered enough to bring a powerful figure to account. She walked into the sunlight, the weight of responsibility still heavy, but lighter than it had been for years. The battle had been won, but the war for justice, systemic, lasting justice, continued. And Mariah would be there, documenting, fighting, and persisting. The city felt quieter than usual. Mariah walked along the plaza where it had all begun, the stone steps gleaming faintly in the afternoon sun. For months, she had battled bureaucracy, intimidation, and the slow grind of systemic inertia. Now, the precinct's misconduct was public, and Officer Harker's authority had been irreparably damaged. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from journalists, allies, and advocacy groups. Each message praised her meticulous work, her persistence, and the courage it had taken to confront a system stacked against her. And yet, despite the accolades, Mariah felt a quiet fatigue, a sense that victory was complex, never simple. Simone's text appeared. Meet me at the office? Need to discuss next steps and community impact. Mariah nodded to herself. The fight was not over. Systemic reform required sustained effort, but there was room now to reflect, to strategize, and to acknowledge the personal cost she had paid. At the office, Kevin was already reviewing press coverage, highlighting instances where public awareness had shifted conversations about accountability in local law enforcement. Look at this, he said, pointing at a graph tracking social media engagement. People are talking. Local officials are responding. Policies are being reconsidered. Mariah allowed herself a brief smile. This is progress, not complete justice, but progress, and it matters. Simone leaned back, sighing. You've done something remarkable, Mariah. But I have to ask, how are you holding up personally? Mariah paused, thinking of the months of late nights, the anxiety, the fear, the confrontations, and the emotional toll of constant vigilance. It's been exhausting, she admitted. There were moments I doubted if I could keep going. But each file, each documented complaint, each witness reminded me why persistence matters. And seeing the impact, it gives purpose to struggle. Kevin added, the city is finally paying attention, and that's because of the evidence you gathered. You turned microaggressions, dismissals, and intimidation into undeniable proof. Mariah nodded, and yet the work continues. Harker's downfall is one victory, but systemic inequities remain. Precincts still operate, policies still fail, and the fight for equity is far from over. Silence settled over the room, punctuated only by the hum of computers. Mariah stared at the spreadsheet on her screen, the timeline of complaints stretching across years. It was more than data. It was history, accountability, and a testament to persistence. Later, she returned to the plaza steps, sitting quietly and watching pedestrians pass by. She remembered Harker's smirk, his arrogance, and the fear he tried to impose. Now, he was a cautionary tale, exposed and diminished by evidence and truth. Yet the victory was tempered by reflection. Change was rarely clean, and justice was rarely absolute. Mariah had achieved a personal and societal win, but the system's flaws persisted. The experience had taken its toll. Sleepless nights, anxiety, and the constant pressure of maintaining vigilance. A young woman approached, holding a smartphone and smiling shyly. "Are you Mariah Lewis?" she asked. "I saw your work in the news. Thank you for what you've done. It's inspiring." Mariah offered a gentle smile. "Thank you. Keep speaking up, documenting, and insisting on accountability. That's how change happens." The woman nodded, and Mariah felt a flicker of hope. Each small action, each documented incident, each courageous step contributed to a larger movement. This was the ongoing fight for justice. Incremental, persistent, and collective. Mariah rose from the steps, the sun casting long shadows across the plaza. The city moved on around her, unaware of the quiet battles that shaped its future. But she knew the impact of her work. Systemic awareness had increased. Conversations about accountability were taking place, and people like Harker could no longer operate unchecked. Her phone buzzed again, another message from a legal advocacy group. We're reviewing the next phase of systemic reform. Your input is invaluable. Mariah smiled softly, the exhaustion giving way to determination. The work continued, but for the first time in months, she felt a sense of accomplishment. The fight for justice was ongoing, but she had made a measurable impact. As she walked down the street, the wind brushing against her face, Mariah reflected on the journey. The harassment, the intimidation, the sleepless nights, and the victories. Justice had been served, but it came with a personal cost, a weight she would carry. And yet, that weight was intertwined with purpose, with resilience, and with hope for the future. The fight for equity was far from over, but Mariah knew she had ignited a spark. And sparks, she reminded herself, could start fires that illuminate even the darkest corners of injustice. The courthouse steps were bathed in morning light, the city alive with a mix of tension, anticipation, and curiosity. Mariah stood at the edge of the crowd, folders in hand, heart steady despite months of chaos and confrontation. Today marked the culmination of a battle she had waged tirelessly, a fight for accountability, equity, and truth. Officer Daniel Harker arrived, escorted by internal affairs agents. His confident stride had vanished, replaced by a cautious, measured pace. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and the once feared officer now faced a public reckoning that could not be ignored. Inside, Mariah watched as legal teams presented compiled evidence. Precinct closure timelines, documented complaints, internal memos, and public records meticulously annotated by her and her allies. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of Harker's untouchable image, a reminder that systemic abuse could not withstand scrutiny when documented and shared. Harker rose to speak, his voice tight. I deny all allegations. These complaints are exaggerated, politically motivated, or unrelated to my duties. The judge's gavel cut through the room like a thunderclap. All evidence presented is verified and has been cross-referenced with public and internal records. The patterns are consistent, and the misconduct is substantiated. Officer Harker will face disciplinary action and further review for legal accountability. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Mariah felt the weight of the moment settle over her. Months of documenting, confronting, and collaborating had led to this point. Justice was not abstract. It was tangible, procedural, and undeniable. Outside, the media swarmed, capturing Mariah's quiet presence. She answered questions carefully, emphasizing systemic reform over personal victory. This isn't just about one individual, she said. It's about ensuring accountability, transparency, and equity across the system. Patterns like these cannot continue unchallenged. Journalists nodded, reporters scribbled notes, and social media erupted with updates. Citizens engaged in conversations about accountability, civil rights, and systemic change. The ripple effect of Mariah's persistence had reached far beyond the precincts she had studied, igniting awareness and activism. Meanwhile, Harker's superiors began internal reviews of other officers and precincts implicated by the evidence. He faced suspension, legal scrutiny, and inevitable social consequences. His career, once untouchable, was now in jeopardy. Mariah stepped away from the press, walking down the courthouse steps with Kevin and Simone. We did it, Kevin said softly. We did what needed to be done, Mariah corrected, her voice firm. But the work doesn't stop here. Systemic change requires ongoing vigilance, documentation, and accountability. We've ignited a spark, but the fire must be tended. Simone smiled, exhausted but proud. You've built more than evidence. You've built a movement. Mariah nodded. The plaza where her journey had begun seemed different now. Sunlight fell across the stone steps. Pedestrians moved through the space unaware of the battles fought and victories won. Yet the impact was present, woven into the city itself through public awareness, advocacy, and accountability.